Hi everyone, and welcome to another Watercolor Wednesday episode. Today's painting is based off of these two photos which were taken of me on my trip to Austria, so let's just get right into it. By the way, I think that Austria is one of the most picturesque places that I've been. The blue skies and the luscious greens are so beautiful and contrasting and abundant that it is impossible not to paint something beautiful if you're using Austria as a reference for your painting. But anyways, once you've taped the borders of your piece of paper, and I've had a lot of questions about the tape I use, I literally just use Scotch tape. It is effective, it is cheap, and multi-purpose, so why not? You can paint on your sky using sort of a baby blue, and the technique that I'm using here to paint my clouds is I dried off my brush and then gently lifted the blue pigment off of the paper, making sure to dry the brush in between clouds, because this creates sort of a natural looking cloudy sky. Once your sky has dried, don't forget to, of course, paint in your grassy pasture at sort of a slant. I opted for a lime green color here, mostly because I can add sort of layers to make it look a little bit more realistic and make it look like there's depth and detail in the pasture rather than just being a flat plain, so you can add various shades of green to this part. Once your your pasture has dried, I wasn't very happy with my sky, with the opacity of it, so I added another layer. I made sure to make the top portion a lot darker by using a more intense blue, but I kept the baby blue shade for the bottom portion of my sky, just because I'm going to be adding a mountain, and if the entire sky is this dark color, the mountain won't really stick out from the painting, so just be aware of that when you're painting your sky. I also went for that same technique that I mentioned earlier of lifting off the paint from your sky to reveal beautiful clouds using a dry brush, so don't forget to repeat that if you also painted a second layer in your sky. And then once your background layer has completely dried, this is when you can start painting on your mountain. So this part is quite simple. You're just creating something that looks like a rough triangle. You don't have to be perfect here, it's whatever works. You can add some grooves and edges sort of to make it look a little bit more realistic and less like just a flat triangle. And then don't forget to fill it in with, a color that is a little bit darker than the sky, but pretty light. And this is because we're going to be adding a lot of pigment to make this mountain look mean and make it look like there are grooves and edges in a mountain. And I've always found it quite difficult to explain how to create depth and like a realistic image of a mountain using watercolors, because I truly believe that it comes intuitively with a lot of practice. I have painted a lot of mountains, and that's because I mostly paint mountains. I paint where I wish to be, which is in the mountains. So if you paint a lot of mountains, you'll kind of develop your own style, and it'll look a lot more realistic. But basically, if I were to try to explain it to you, I just add random lines and blotches in random places, stretching from the bottom of the mountain, sloping upwards, even adding some black in there to add extra contrast. Here I tried something I've never tried before. I took white watercolor straight from a tube, so it was still wet. And I did this because I wanted more opacity to my painting, because I wanted to create sort of a snowy top, and if I just used the dry watercolor that is in my half pans, the white is not as opaque because it's already dry. So here I just used it straight from the tube, and it created this snowy illusion. I made sure to add it in random places on my mountain so it looked like, the snow is melting unevenly, and I also made sure to then kind of border the white with darker accents of blue which I didn't film because I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but as you can see here, it actually turned out quite beautiful. So you can definitely try that as well. Once your mountain has completely dried, we are now going to paint on the tree line, and we're going to be painting on 2 layers of trees. The first one, we're going to be using a kind of lime green color, so I used lime green mixed with a little bit of yellow just to add extra vibrance here. And the reason why we're painting on 2 layers is because we want it to appear that there's depth, you know, that there are multiple layers of trees. So these green trees are going to be peeking out from the layer that we paint over top. At one point, you can see here, I got kind of lazy and just started painting lines because most of it is going to be covered up with a darker green or even black, so you don't have to be too detailed in that first layer. So once that first layer has dried, you're going to then paint on the darker second layer here. You can use green mixed with a lot of black, or just use straight up black, because then it's less effort to mix the two. And here you're painting on exactly the same thing. You're just painting on another layer on top of the green, but just make sure you let some of that green peek through. Otherwise, you just wasted a lot of time painting on one layer that is going to be completely covered anyway. So just allow some of those green trees to peek through. I wanted to add a little bit more dimension to my painting, or I don't know, complexity, whatever you want to call it. So I painted on a tree that appears really close up, and you do that by stretching the trunk of the tree from the bottom all the way to the top of the page. By the way, I did release a video going over 4 different ways to paint pine trees, so if you're having difficulty finding your style of tree, or you just want to explore different ways of painting trees, I have linked that video in the description as well. If I remember, I'll link it in the corner of this video, so definitely check that out if you want to learn how to paint 4 different types of pine trees. And by the way, this one that I just painted is one of those 4. I also wanted to add a little bit more complexity to my pasture, a little bit more depth and texture especially, so I painted on grass using a very thin brush. By the way, as always, I have linked the supplies that I use in my videos in the description if you want to check them out and add them to your collection. Using my links does give me a little bit of commission, so it helps me to continue to make these videos for you guys. Here I'm using a quadruple zero brush for my details, at least for some of the details, and if you're having trouble creating the kind of details that you want, then I think investing in a very thin brush might help you achieve those details, so just consider that. But I have painted on a few flowers here, and once I was happy with the flowers and the grass that I painted, I peeled off the tape of the edges here to reveal a clean and crisp border. Thank you very much for watching my video today, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe, like my video, and stay tuned for next week's episode.